everything paled when compared to the Lucy family obsession with football. I attended my first game of footy at the ripe old age of 12 days old. This becomes even more impressive when you know that I was 10 days old when I was adopted. I did not miss a single match for the next 17 years, during which time we were premiers once. The fact that we were a bunch of losers was only one of the reasons I hated football. We barracked for a club called Claremont, even though we could not have lived further away from that suburb, and our socio-economic world could not have been more different. Claremont did not in any way resemble our home of Melville. To use a television metaphor, it was the Howells to our Gilligan. Why we supported this club was never properly explained to me. Recently, Niall informed me it was because our grandfather used to drink in a pub frequented by ex-players. Nor was the fact that if I was sick, I would still be taken to the match, locked in the car and checked on at half-time. I cannot imagine any kind of occurrence that would have prevented our family from attending. Mum, Dad and Niall would have been trying to make the opening bounce even if the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were galloping through our front garden. There were times I wished that I was locked in the car, even the boot, because Perth winters can be extremely cold and wet and we were never under shelter. We always had to stand right outside the public toilets for the sake of my mother's bladder. Mum constantly needed to spend a penny, and having been with her on one occasion when she'd had an accident, I was quite willing to watch the game from inside a cistern if necessary, even though those conveniences smelt like a cross between a diarrhea-filled pair of underpants and a meat pie. Who needed to sit in one of the grandstands when Mum had the perfect solution to the weather? Rather than raincoats, she would dress herself and me in jumbo green garbage bags. I think this was a cost-cutting exercise, even though it's hard to imagine that a couple of plastic capes or coats would have tipped the Lucy budget into the red. The football is no fashion show, but why didn't she just strap a used pad to my head and be done with it? There was one other factor that made the game cringeworthy, not just for me, but for the men of the family as well, and that was the way Mum barracked for her team. There is the kind of supporter who is loyal to their outfit but can still appreciate a skillful move from the other side. Then there is the kind who, if there is some kind of freak accident involving a member of the opposition being permanently blinded, maimed or castrated, will cheer wildly at their misfortune. Mum was a little one-eyed. She hated every other team, loathed the umpires and even abused some of Claremont's finest with the kind of language that would have made Kevin Bloody Wilson blush. Dad and Niall kept quiet and, thanks to Mum's running commentary of obscenities, which she didn't mind uttering in front of strangers, often had to step away a little to avoid being attacked by offended fans who didn't want to hit a middle-aged woman but would have liked to have hit someone. In a classic case of if you can't beat 'em, join 'em, I eventually became a die-hard, if silent, fan as well. My brother would take me out on the field after the match to collect the players' signatures. I had the beanie, the scarf, the Guernsey, and even tried to appear interested when we watched every sports news replay and Victorian football broadcast. I remember winning the premiership as being vaguely anticlimactic. Somehow it did not quite compare to the excitement of winning a single game in a season, possibly because it was these years that bonded our family with a shared sense of bitterness and disappointment. Football is the only sport I know anything about, and while I stopped going to the matches when I left home, in recent years I've started taking an interest again. Like much that I thought I had left behind in my childhood, it must have gotten under my skin.
One of my earliest memories is of our family going to the football and Dad pulling his raincoat over his head and pretending he was mentally challenged so that he could get in for free. And let me tell you, our family never missed a game of football in 17 years. If I was sick, Mum and Dad would still take me to the football. They'd simply lock me in the car and check on me at half-time. This was before casinos. They were visionaries in many ways.